A blind beggar sat at the city gates, ignored by most, pitied by few. His frail hands reached out for alms, his voice cracked with hunger. But what no one knew was that this beggar was no ordinary man. He was once a mighty king, betrayed, dethroned, and cast into darkness. Yet fate had one final twist for him, a chance to reclaim his throne. But would he take it? Or had he learned a deeper truth about power and humanity? The scorching sun beat down on the crowded marketplace. Among the merchants and travelers, a blind beggar sat by the city gates, his tattered robes covered in dust. "Spare some coins, kind sir," he whispered. But most people walked past him, uninterested in the fate of a broken man. Only a young boy, Rami, would occasionally bring him scraps of food. "Here, old man, eat this," he said, placing a piece of bread in the beggar's trembling hands. The beggar smiled. "Thank you, child. You remind me of someone from long ago." His fingers traced the shape of the bread, as if remembering a forgotten luxury. But what no one knew, what no one even suspected, was that this blind beggar was once King Aldrich, ruler of this very kingdom. Years ago, Aldrich was a wise and just ruler, beloved by his people. But his own brother, Prince Edric, envied his throne. One fateful night, betrayal struck. Aldrich's most trusted advisor poisoned his wine, and when he awoke, he was blind. "Your reign ends today," Edric had whispered in his ear. "A blind king is no king at all." By dawn, Aldrich was dragged from his palace and left in the wilderness to die. But fate had other plans. Lost, broken, and alone, Aldrich stumbled through forests and villages, learning how cruel the world could be. The once mighty king had to beg for food, face humiliation, and understand the pain of the common people. He learned that not all rulers are loved, and that suffering was everywhere, beyond the walls of his golden palace. It was only then that he realized. He had ruled his kingdom, but he had never truly known it. One evening, as Aldrich sat shivering in the cold, Rami approached him again. "You shouldn't be out here," the boy said, wrapping a thin cloak around the beggar's shoulders. Aldrich's fingers traced the fabric. It felt familiar. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "My mother works in the palace," Rami answered. "The new king, King Edric, gave away many of the old king's things. He says he saved us from a fool." Aldrich's heart ached. His own belongings now given away like scraps. His brother's lies had poisoned not only his rule, but the hearts of the people. But this was his chance. That night, Aldrich whispered to Rami, "Take me to the palace." The boy hesitated. "But the king doesn't allow beggars inside." Aldrich smiled. "Then let's not go as beggars." Together, they devised a plan. Disguised under a hooded cloak, Aldrich followed Rami into the palace, his heart pounding with every step. The walls whispered with memories of his past life, the throne that was once his, now occupied by a traitor. In the grand hall, Edric feasted among his nobles, his laughter echoing through the chamber. Aldrich, still hidden, spoke in a low voice. "A wise king once ruled this land. Do you know his fate?" The room fell silent. Edric's face darkened. "That fool is long dead." Aldrich stepped forward, throwing off his hood. "Are you sure?" Gasps filled the hall. The blind beggar stood before them, his voice unmistakable. Guards rushed to seize him, but Aldrich raised a hand. "I am not here to fight, but if you claim my rule was unworthy, let the people decide." The nobles murmured among themselves. The truth had to be faced. Edric, cornered, agreed to a trial. The next day, the people of the city gathered. Aldrich, standing before them, asked, "Who among you has suffered under Edric's rule?" One by one, voices rose, merchants overtaxed, farmers beaten, soldiers punished for questioning orders. The truth shattered Edric's illusion. As the chants grew louder, Edric fled the palace, his own fear consuming him. Aldrich stood before his reclaimed throne. The palace echoed with silence. "Take your rightful place, my king," an advisor said. But Aldrich hesitated. He had spent years among the people, suffering like them. Would he return to his throne, or was his destiny elsewhere? At last, he turned to Rami. A true king serves his people, and sometimes that means walking among them, not ruling from above. Aldrich walked away from the throne. His kingdom did not need a ruler, it needed a guide. Aldrich chose to live not as a king, but as a servant of his people. He traveled across the kingdom, healing the broken, guiding the lost, and teaching wisdom to those who would listen. And so, the blind beggar who was once a king became greater than any ruler before him. The moral of the story: true power is not in ruling over people but in understanding them. A king is only as great as the love of his people. What would you choose? Power or purpose? Let us know in the comments.